Ladies and gentlemen, I have 3 p.m. on Thursday, December 17th. Before we convene, may I just please remind us and the public that we are being televised and recorded by SCTV. May we begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That brings us to our first public comment. Is anyone here for public comment? Please be reminded to state your name and address. You'll have 5 minutes, and just make sure the green light is on, please.
It is.
Thank you.
I'm Mike Sullivan, 27 Knott Avenue. I want to speak in support of the nomination for Pete Williams to be a member of the Historic District Committee, and I wish to speak in support of the application for myself to be a member, as an alternate member of the Historic District Committee. For Pete, and I won't repeat too much, but for Pete, I understand that there is a certain degree of animus towards me by the town. That should not reflect on Pete. Pete has been an excellent chair of the Historic District Committee. He is a valued member. As you can see from the letter of support for Pete, he would be dearly missed by the committee. And he has done nothing that should cause you to reject him. There was a incident at your last meeting where a homeowner came to you and complained about certain conduct by myself and Pete. And the homeowner was supported by her representative. Briefly mention the homeowner. Her complaint goes with the job. That's the price you pay for serving the public. People will complain. I understand that. But the complaint was odd. It came in two parts. First part was that a historic preservationist hired by the town, not by us, instructed by the town, not by us, said he had to go inside the home in order to do his appraisal. That, by the way, is done all the time. But I think what's interesting in this particular case is that the home is unoccupied. So, okay, it happened. I can't find a harm in it, but it happened. And then the second thing is she didn't think we took her complaint very seriously. I'm sorry, I can't address that. That's just what it was. But when the representative spoke, what we had was a hyperbolic assault on me and Pete. A lot of adjectives, atrocious. I've never seen anything like it in my 40 years. Rude. But I don't know if you listen carefully to it. Where were the facts? And as far as I can see, and I'm trying to be fair, and I told the representative that I would be speaking on this here today, as I told her I'd be speaking to the Historic District Committee. I don't do things to people's backs. But the facts that she raised were, one, that we told the owner that she should suck it up. It was never said. It was never said. And as I've said in my own committee, as I've said, if it had been said by anybody, I would have said that's improper. We don't talk to people that way, and we never have. And the other thing, as a fact was stated, was that we said to the owner, if you don't like our rulings, you can sell your property. Didn't happen. Did not happen. So you were invited to look at the tape. I don't know if any of you did, and I can't ask, I suppose. I can ask rhetorically. Did you? You should have, because then you would have seen these things did not happen. And to have Pete's recommendation stained by those comments is unfair to him. He is a valued member of our community. He's a highly successful individual. He does a great job running the Stark District Committee in his last year as chair, and he'd be chair again, I assume, this year if he's reappointed. As to myself, I got a recommendation from the committee as well. I think it was somewhat unprecedented that you turned me down, and it was somewhat unprecedented that the committee said no. And what they said was they have full confidence in me. They said the same thing about Pete, by the way, full confidence in me. And as to me, they said I'm respectful and courteous, which I am. So thank you for your time. I'd appreciate being appointed. I don't expect it, but I'd appreciate it. And definitely, don't take it all out on Pete. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Anybody else for public comment? Okay, we don't have any minutes for December 5th, so let's move on to the town manager's report.
Just a quick update. Our next meeting isn't until Thursday, January 9th, in light of the upcoming holidays. I know this past week, Bill Jennings, the finance director, has been communicating with the finance committee chair and vice chair to work out the review schedule for February, so we're trying to nail that down. So once that's finalized, I'll get that to you, and that's taken up a lot of all of our time, just trying to get ready for that and our submission to the select board at the end of January. It's fair to say that other than our retirement assessment, which came in less than it has the last 3 years, which is great, percentage increase wise, it was closer to 4% instead of the double digits that we had seen the last few. So that's helpful. I think we're still, our biggest concern relates to the state budget, which we really, haven't heard anything about and probably won't until after we make our presentation in late January. And most importantly, health insurance, just so we'll keep an eye on those. And I know we're going to have to adjust accordingly as we go forward. But I think our intent is when we present the budget to do a good base budget within the normal percentages that we typically look at to try to properly fund some accounts that are causing us some trouble and yet still stay within that number. And then we'll probably have a separate number if we wanted, for example, to try to address some of the DPW road infrastructure more, what that percentage would look like. So it should be really clear when we present it. It's just that we don't know quite what it is yet. So, we still have at least a month plus to go on that. And then once we get better information in February and March, we can fine tune things. Heather and Bill have also spent a lot of time on the capital budget. So we'll be making a presentation on that. A few other quick things I thought you'd be interested in. The ARPA funds that the town received from the federal government have a sort of an expenditure end date of the end of calendar year 2026, so a full 2 years from now. But there's a federal requirement that by the end of this December that we sort of categorize what the remaining funds would be used for. So we're working on nailing that down as we speak. Maybe once we get past January, I could just give you a mini report. The vast majority of things have been spent already on all the things that we've talked about through the years, so I can give you an overview on that. And then also just, what the intent is. And I know our goal is to make that listing quite generic in the sense of, building and operational improvements, which is what you're allowed to do. But I think a rough number that I've heard Bill talk about with Caroline is, of all the funds we got, an unencumbered part is, about 500,000 to 700,000 is left. So I'll give you an update on all that, with earmarks on where that will be spent. So I'll highlight that for you once we get to that point. And then lastly, I just wanted to give you a further update. I know we gave you one on the wastewater efforts, particularly with our special act that seems to still be stuck at the state level. And John Giorgio's been trying to communicate with the Senate counsel who had some questions. And so he answered those questions and had some questions back. It's been a couple months. We're trying to get that nailed out to try to get that moving. That's on the wastewater front. And then in addition, I know we talked about several months ago that we're trying to, the big problem out there for the future is where do you dispose of the treated effluent and what land do you have that's sort of unencumbered that you could get the volumes that the 5 towns who were part of that 3-level state grant project regionally, and also JBC, their future needs. So we identified through those studies what the ultimate amount we'd need, and then where do you find enough land to do that with the other restrictions that are on the property out there. So there has been some outreach with the Army Corps of Engineers about some land that they own. I guess we would call it along the canal, but it's on the opposite side of 6A along the canal that abuts base property. So we've sent a couple of letters of support on that front, trying to flesh that out more. And I think one of the difficult things that will have to try to be addressed is the Army would have to have a public entity to transfer that land to, even if it's through an easement. And where Converge is now the private owner of both the wastewater and water systems and the disposal systems, we're trying to figure out how to skin that cat. So we've been working with the 5 towns, the Cape legislators from our area, and also with the military personnel to try to see how we could come up with that, and some of the county officials that oversee wastewater and help us at the Cape Cod Commission, and then also some of the interest groups that are on the Cape that we deal with a lot, like the Association to Preserve Cape Cod. So we're trying to find a way to address that. I would hope, in the next several months we might have a way forward. There's a couple different ways we could do it, but to try to resolve that quickly for such an important thing, it's pretty difficult. And then just along those lines, Heather and Dave Mason and I have had some recent conversations with the commission, Cape Cod Commission, just to try to keep them up to speed of what we're trying to do, where we could use their help, sort of what do they see from a bigger regional perspective. We're trying to progress in Sandwich. A lot of other towns are ripping up roads and putting in sewer lines, and we're not quite there yet. How do we do that the best way, but also the most cost-effective way? So it's the same things we've been struggling with for years, just trying to get some answers. And that's it.
Anybody have any questions for Bud? Just dialing back to the ARPA funds for a second. That's a 2-year heads up that we need to provide.
Yeah, so we, as long as we've already had things categorized internally, so it's just sort of memorializing that. And then some of the things that we had set money for example, there was money for any cost overruns on the boardwalk, so we're trying to pay the last bills there, so we know, making this number up. If we had set aside 100,000 and we're only going to need 17, well, that frees up the 83,000 to go back towards other things. So that's what we're trying to do. But it's all along, it can only be spent on services and equipment that are allowed underneath the program, and that's what we've been doing all along. So I just thought it'd be good, once we get close to the end, it would be helpful maybe to show the public and the board what we've been spending it on, what's been earmarked for what remains. And probably the most important one is that $850,000 that we received from the county. That's been earmarked for the improvements at the high school. So as soon as we get past the special town meeting and can sign that contract, which, by the way, that'll be on your agenda after town meeting, the meeting after town meeting, because that contract is for greater than $1 million, just so we can sign that and keep moving on that. So that's great.
It is. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Okay. Correspondence, statements, and announcements? Anybody? I have a few, if you don't mind. School committee met on December 11th. The 5 members of the Student Advisory Committee are scheduled to meet prior to the school committee meeting on January 29th at 5 p.m. The fiscal year 2025 operating budget was presented as being on track. While it is encouraging to receive bids for the Forestdale and Oak Ridge HVAC projects, the results were in excess of capital budget estimates. It is hoped discussion with the town consultant will produce options. The New England Mountain Bike Association presented a proposal to create a pump track at Oak Ridge School. The proposal was accepted. The School District Wellness Committee update was presented by Nursing Department Head Nicola Bordelin. This terrific presentation will be followed by the district's first ever Wellness Fair in March of 2025. December 16th, Bikeways and Pedestrian Committee. Progress on the service road shared use pass was updated. Progress on design of the canal to service road was updated. The application period for Mass Trails grants is upon us. The committee has undertaken an extensive audit of Sandwich crosswalks. Results and thoughts will be shared going forward. Appropriate grants will be explored. The plans to upgrade the bike racks at the schools, as well as the Center for Active Living, will be undertaken. And then yesterday's school safety committee was addressed the need for a meeting on January 16th. And that's all I have unless anybody has anything else. Okay. Staff meeting. The Sandwich Select Board will hold a public hearing on Thursday, December 19th, 2024, at 3:05 p.m. in the historic Town Hall Auditorium, 130 Main Street, Sandwich, Mass. 02563, upon the petition of NSTAR, electric company doing business as Eversource Energy, to request permission to place one new fully owned pole, number 3092A, on Chase Road in Sandwich, work order number 147-29498. Anyone wishing to be heard will be afforded an opportunity at that time. Motion to open the public hearing?
Make a motion to open the public hearing.
Motion by Mr. George, second by Mr. Ellis. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Public hearing is open.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Julie Longer, and I'm from Eversource. And again, to reiterate, that we would like to install one fully owned pole on Chase Road. It is for Next Grid Partners' solar project. And the reason being that we need this pole is that the solar panels are up on a high hill, and the pitch of the wires would not enable us to go from across the street where the pole is already located up to where up where they need the electricity.
Okay. Anybody from the public have a comment on this application? Motion to close the public hearing?
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Okay. Motion by Mr. George, second by Mr. Ellis. The public hearing is closed. Do we have any questions for the applicant?
No, I've seen that solar field up there.
No, it's a good application.
Yes, I know the area, and I agree. Thank you very much. Motion to approve?
Yep. Make a motion, we approve a fully owned pole number 309-2A on Chase Road.
Motion by Mr. George, second by Mr. Ellis. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 3-0, it's unanimous.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you for your efforts. To you as well. Okay. Staff meeting, fiscal year 2025 tax rate classification workshop. Director of Assessing, Ben Steich.
Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Ben Steich. I'm the Director of Assessing. I'm here today to present the FY25 tax rate classification hearing. First, I'd just like to thank the Board of Assessors for their contribution to this hearing. I'd also like to thank my assessing staff and PK Valuation for their hard work leading up to this, because without them, I couldn't be here. The classification hearing is held each year to determine whether we shift a portion of the property tax burden from one class of property to another, and it must be done before we can set the tax rate. Just a little side note, we just successfully completed our 5-year certification process, and our finalized values were approved on Monday, December 16th of 2024. So there are 4 options presented at classification hearing that would allow the reallocate the tax obligation among the 5 classes of property, and those 5 classes of property are on the screen there. If you residential, open space, commercial, industrial, and personal property. The 4 options that I'll present to you will be in the following slides. For our fiscal 25, the full and fair cash value for the entire town is just shy of $7.5 billion. And that's an increase about 6.5% from last year. And right now, the currently estimated excess levy capacity is $732,066. Here's just a breakdown of all the average values from the LA4. Just to highlight a few, the single family on the top there. Right now, our average value of a single family home is $717,300, which is a almost 7.5% increase from last year. You look at just the one that kind of sticks out to me anyway, is the 3-family. We only have 6 in town. You have 1 property that has any kind of big change to it, it's going to skew that number. So that's why that's so high. But everything else pretty much falls in line with that 6.5 to 7%. Commercial value, our average value now for a commercial property is $826,200. That was up 6%, and then industrial at $571,700, just a 3.5%. Like I said, overall we did a 6.5% for fiscal 25, just because of the strong real estate market that we're still continuing to have. These property values are based off of calendar year 2023 sales data, and they don't necessarily reflect what's going on in today's market. It's always 2 years behind. Here's a breakdown of the levy. Just to right now, we're estimating the tax rate to be $10.57. As usual, you can see the residential properties take up the lion's portion of the tax levy. It's it's $70 million, and then the commercial, industrial, and personal property make up the rest. So for fiscal 25, the tax rate impact on the average single-family home, if you start from the far right, the average value is $717,300, increase of the 7%. The tax rate, obviously, as the values increase in the town, the tax rate continues to fall. You can see that from 2023, 24, and 25, starting at $1150 and coming down to this year with the estimated at $1057, decrease about 2%. So now with the average tax bill being $7,581.86, which is an increase from last year of 5.2%. In tax dollars, you're looking at $375.02. The state average right now, we estimated at $76.95. We're still below the state average. So here are the 4 levy options that we have for shifting the tax burden. The first option that we'll present to you is a split tax rate, which allows the shift of the tax burden from the residential class of property to the commercial, industrial, and personal property classes, also known as the CIP. The second option is the open space discount. That may reduce the amount of tax levy paid by the open space class to no less than 75% of its full and fair cash value, or cash share of the levy. Option 3 is the residential exemption, which allows for the shift of the portion of the residential tax burden from primary residents to second homeowners and primary residents with higher property values. And the fourth option is the small commercial exemption, which creates a shift that reduces the taxes paid by owners of properties occupied by small businesses and shifts them to the larger commercial industrial taxpayers. So under option 1, with the estimated tax rate of $10.57, what we've always historically, we've never adopted anything other than a factor of 1, so everybody pays the same tax rate. At a 50% shift, because that's where we did have to go if you ever did it for the first time. It does reduce the residential rate down to $9.93, but it does increase the commercial, industrial, and personal property to $15.86. That 50% shift basically results in the commercial properties subsidizing the residential properties. And residential properties now, make up 89% of the town, while the CIP make up the only 11%. And that split would be detrimental to the commercial, industrial, and personal property. Just one little side note on here too. We have the canal, we have the pilot agreements. Because there's a provision within their pilot agreement, if we were to ever shift the tax rate, do a split on it, because of the pilot, the canal would pay the residential rate. So they would actually only pay the 993, so they would not get the 1586, which would further compound the problem with the CIP. Another calculation that we have to go through is the minimum residential factor. It is used to make sure the shift of tax burden complies with the law. There's a calculation that's done within our DLS gateway. And because of the FY24 residential percentage of 88.4% is greater than that bottom number of the 83.72, it would cause the residential taxpayers to pay higher percentage share than they did last year, which is not allowed under the Chapter 200 Acts of 1988 for Mass General Law, Chapter 58, Section 1A. So basically, because of that, it really renders this option, it's not available. It's something that we can't do. We have to stop here. We cannot split our tax rate because of it. So with that, the Board of Assessors does recommend sticking with the residential factor of 1 with a no shift. Option 2 is the open space discount. The Select Board may allow up to for a discount for all open space properties. The discount may reduce the amount of tax levy paid by the open space class to no less than 75 of its full and fair share of the tax levy. It's a 25% discount. In Sandwich, we do not assess open space. We do not have any. What we call open space is generally something that's attached to a subdivision or tax exempt. So really this option is not applicable to the town of Sandwich. So for there, the Board of Assessors recommends not adopting the open space discount. The third option is the residential exemption. It was enacted in 1979. The residential exemption is an option under property tax classification that shifts the tax burden within the residential class from owners of moderately valued homes to owners of second homes, higher valued homes, and residential properties not occupied by the owner, including apartments and vacant land. How it works is the Select Board may authorize up to 35% exemption to qualifying Sandwich residents. The reduction in value is applied to the qualifying properties, and the burden shifts to the non-qualifying properties. The property must be your primary residence, by meaning of it's something you would use for your income tax purposes. Obviously, that's where you're going to file your income from. Adopting a residential exemption will result in an increased tax rate, which I'll illustrate. And currently, we estimate that we're 84% resident and 11% non-resident, and that really hasn't changed much over the past few years. So the residential calculation, on this slide, the total residential value up there on the top is 6.6 billion. It's divided by the total residential properties of eligible properties of 10,074 to get the average residential value of 659,386. The adopted percentage, on this slide it shows 0 to 20, is applied to that value. It's then multiplied by the eligible parcels, which is 8,462. That exempted value is then removed from the total class value. This results in a less taxable value, therefore a higher tax rate because the tax levy has to remain the same. If you note the bottom line, zero exemption, we have the 1057 with the estimated tax rate. But as you increase that percentage on the exemption amount, the tax rate increases. So what I'm trying to illustrate here on this slide is that while with the residential exemption, there is tax savings for the lower value properties, but the exemption raises the tax rate so that higher value properties see less savings. And there's a break-even point where properties will start to see an increase in taxes regardless of the exemption. So if you did qualify and you had a house value of $785,000 or more, you would actually end up paying the higher tax rate. So like I said, the break-even point this year, we have an average value of $717,300. We're not that far from the break-even point at this point. So bills of all vacant landowners, second homeowners, any qualified owner over $785,000 in value would increase as a result of the residential exemption. And because of that, the Board of Assessors recommends no residential exemption. So the fourth option, like the residential exemption, the small commercial exemption is a discount up to 10% off the assessed value of commercial class property that is occupied by businesses as qualified by the Department of Unemployment Assistance. You can have no more than 10 employees. The assessed evaluation must be less than $1 million. The 10% small commercial exemption would raise the commercial industrial rate to $11.31 from the single tax rate of $10.57. This higher rate creates a shift that reduces the taxes paid by the owners of the properties occupied by small businesses and shifts them to the larger commercial industrial taxpayers. And this only applies to the property owner. It actually does not apply to the small business that's leasing the office space. So with that, the Board of Assessors recommends a no small commercial exemption. So just a quick summary. For option one, no split tax rate, the Board of Assessors recommends a single tax rate, a residential factor of 1, or no split. Option two, open space discount, they recommend not adopting an open space discount, primarily because it's not applicable to the town of Sandwich. Residential exemption, the Board of Assessors recommends not adopting the residential exemption. And on the fourth option, the small commercial exemption, the Board of Assessors recommends not adopting the small commercial exemptions. Any questions? It's a lot there. It's a lot of numbers.
It's a lot to absorb, but the final assessment makes perfect sense, Ben. Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry, bud.
If I could just highlight when Ben mentioned that it was a full reclassification year. So many years ago, it was every 3 years, and then the state changed that to every 5 years. So they scrutinize the values every year, but they really go over the top, rightfully so, in those 5th years. So this was a full revaluation year. So it was a lot of work of the entire assessing department, sharing their data, explaining why they came up with values. A lot of information went back and forth both ways, and just a lot of work on Ben and his staff, and I just wanted to thank them for, getting through it. And the state really didn't have any real issues once they went through everything and all the information was provided. And when Ben mentioned PK, that's a company that we hire to help with the commercial valuations, because it's something that, we don't possess the expertise for internally, and so we do contract with them to help us with that. So just for a little bit of background. And then Ben in his office does smoothing each year, so there's not a sticker shock every 5 years. Knowing what's happened to the real estate markets on Cape Cod the last several years, imagine if we never changed anyone's value for those 5 years, and your property value may have doubled over that time frame. So
I used an analogy yesterday, and I don't can I use it today? Every year we go to the dentist, we get our teeth cleaned. So every 5th year, you're required to have a root canal without Novocaine. So that's basically what certification is. So they keep you clean for 4 years, and then you have a major procedure. And then they keep you clean for another 4 years, and then a major procedure. So it's a constant work, and that number is always changing. So it prevents big spikes in, unless they're necessary because of sales, but it helps smooth things out going from year to year.
And just one quick question, please. For an individual structure, it's once every 10 years off the top of my head?
For visitation,
Yes.
so we're required by law to be at a property once every 10 years. We went through that, we're constantly in that cyclical process. We are fully in compliant now, which is, it was a process to get that done. Having, my staff out there on a daily basis, just, making sure the data was correct. And I think with that work that we did, or they did, excuse me, I didn't do anything, that really shows in our reval that things did go smoothly. The data was correct. The numbers came into where they should be. So there was definitely, there was some, there was evidence was there that it works.
Sure. Thank you for the clarification. Bud?
Yes, here's just a couple things, seeing how we're approaching budget season, and I know you guys are aware of this, but just so the public knows, and a lot of times we look at that one-page summary of our budget, the revenues on one side, expenses on another, and it just focuses on our general fund revenues, which is where our taxes mostly go towards. So a couple things, like we're always careful when we do our prior year's levy, what the new growth is going to be, because you never want to overstate your new growth, because that's how you count on money that you don't have. So if you look with Ben's data, our new growth was more than what we had said it would be in May, which is what we're supposed to do. I just wanted to clarify that. And then the other thing is we estimate our excess levy reserve. Now, until the power plant's new unit number 4 was put online, we never had an unit number 3, I'm sorry. There never was such thing as an excess levy reserve. We went as close to the line as we could. And so I think the board and the public and the finance committees through the year has been really careful not to spend all that money from the new growth from the power plant. And I think we've been very judicious on how those funds have been used. So when we went to town meeting last May, if you go back and look at that one-page summary, we were hoping we'd have an excess levy reserve of about $3.25 million. One of the first numbers Ben gave is it was actually 3.75. So that's what we want. We want to make sure that we're not overstating our revenues, because that's how you get in trouble if you count on money you're not going to have. So that's something that we struggle with every year, about that fine balance. And then the other thing I want to mention about new growth is, again, we usually say it's going to be about 500,000, and I think this year it was 700 something. But we've talked a few times about the high tension power line improvements that Eversource has done the last several summers. We've seen that work going on, and through the last winter. So any utility valuations come from the state, not from the towns. So we're expecting, but it's not set in stone, we're expecting a year from now that our new growth will be impacted by those, that work that took place and the added value that was done on those high tension lines. So what that will be, we don't know. We're hopeful that it's a decent number. And as always, we should be really careful on how we use it, or more importantly, don't use it. Because as we've talked about at our last meeting with the finance committee and school committee, items like the health insurance is going up by a lot more than 2.5%. So, we have to try to ride that wave through the years. So we're trying to be careful. And so I know one thing Ben gets tired of me asking is, hey, do you know what the new growth is going to be from the power lines yet? Because I'm hopeful that's going to be a big number. So we'll see a year from now what that was. Even if they tell that to us early in the next calendar year, we won't actually see that until we have this same hearing next year. So we'll see.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and one more thing, because the public, we say this every year, the paper runs a story every year. The first 2 quarterly bills that go out in June and are due in July, and then another one in October, those are based on the actual bills from the prior year, from the actual values from the prior year and the rate from the prior year. The bill that you're going to get, people will get in January, that's due in February 1st and then the next quarter, those are the actual increases. So what's difficult is all the increase for the next year comes in the last 2 quarters, so quarters 3 and 4. So a lot of times when people get the bills, they say, oh my God, I multiply this quarterly bill by 4 and it's way more than it should be. It's because the first 2 quarters didn't include any of those increases. By law, every single, from Boston to the smallest town in the Berkshires, we all have to issue our bills the same way. So I know there'll be a story in the paper. I know there'll be questions that will come up, and we'll try to explain it on the website. And I know the assessing page has an explanation of all this, but just so the public's aware, the bill that you get for quarters 3 and 4 reflect all of the increase, including what you should have gotten in 1 and 2, but it wasn't included there.
Thank you. And the explanation of that is always helpful to be on the website. Thank you very much for that as well. Anybody else? Do we need a motion to accept Ben's report? Okay.
Make a motion, we vote on and take option 1 as presented.
Second.
Motion by Mr. George, second
Oh,
by
there we
Mr. Ellis. All those, in-
Wait, if we could just read that, because it's got to address all 4 factors.
Okay, all right. Move to continue the use of residential factor of 1, not to grant open space discount, not to grant residential exemptions, not to grant small commercial exemptions.
Second.
motion as amended by Mr. George, second by Mr. Ellis. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous, 3-0, and thanks again, Ben.
Thank you, guys.
you.
I'll see you next year.
I should point out, Ben's one of the 5 department heads that are participating in that Leadership Matters program up in Boston. So he's had to spend a lot of time Fridays and Saturdays. I think has one more weekend to go for that, but everyone's been really positive about it. I want to thank him for the extra time that he's putting in there. So
Sure, glad to hear it's been positive, and thank you for your service. Okay.
Chicago?
Moving on to old business. Special town meeting, finalize and sign the January 13th, 2025 warrant.
yeah, so like literally the substantive part of the warrant is verbatim, like not a single letter has been changed. We did add, because when the warrant was posted before the planned November special town meeting, the Capital Improvement Planning Committee voted on 3 of the articles, so we had their recommendations, so those have been added. Other than the date, nothing else has changed, so John Giorgio from Town Council's office looked at everything, so the warrant's good to go. The reason we're trying to vote it tonight, normally it needs to be posted for 14 calendar days, but we want to get it up early in light of the holidays, so Melissa's lined up. We're either going to post it tomorrow, most likely, or if not, Monday. A little more than a week earlier than we need to, but it would be good to get that up and get it publicized. And I don't know if you want me to run through the articles, but they're the same exact ones that we had. Yeah.
No, we're good.
Make a motion, we accept the warrant as presented for the special town meeting, Monday, January 13th, 2025.
Second.
Motion by Mr. George, second by Mr. Ellis. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous, 3-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Recommended license agreement, electric vehicle charging stations.
This one's me. Just as quickly as I can here, we've been working for some time, sort of planning for the potential for EV charging stations at several municipal locations with the focus of the Center for Active Living, 100 Route 6A, and then at some point possibly the library location. We've had some specific priorities in mind that the town doesn't want to be in the sort of the gas station business, dealing direct consumer to consumer, responding to facilities maintenance calls, doing the billing, that kind of thing just didn't seem like an appropriate municipal role for something that is such a small consumer item. So we were looking for a way to do this, provide the service both for ourselves and for the public in a way that we could manage it. We've been working with the towns of Barnstable, Falmouth, and Bourne to get an idea of what they've been doing, because it seems to make some good sense if we all do the best we can to work with the same vendor that will likely get a better product in the long term. We have gotten to know a gentleman named Ben Kahane from Integrative Charging Solutions, and they've done a location in Falmouth, and they're looking at working with Barnstable and Bourne. He would propose to install the charging stations on town property at our designated locations and then manage them on behalf of the town. So it's a really great solution for us. And we propose doing that through a license agreement, which is a revocable agreement. Either party can revoke that. It's interesting because there's some significant investment that's required, of course, to install the meters. But he's very interested in working with us and developing his program on the Cape. This is slightly time sensitive since we have submitted our application for make-ready funds with Eversource. And that was really at his prodding to get that in before the end of this fiscal year, because there's some expectation that there'll be changes to the program, and also that there's a very strong likelihood that the program will be oversubscribed. And again, this is all secondhand for me, knowledge that many communities or applicants submitted requests for large numbers of EV stations, which may or may not be warranted at those locations. So the state may be looking at reallocating the funds across the state so that they're distributing the EV charging stations across the Commonwealth. So we wanted to be able to be part of that, should that be an option. So on our behalf, Ben submitted that for the 100 Route 6A site and for the Center for Active Living site. And that really is like step 1A of a long process that says, okay, you are a candidate for potential state funding. There's this significant study that both Eversource and consultants will do to take a look to make sure that the utility system where you're proposing the EV charging stations can support them. We think we're in good shape both at 100 Route 6A and Cal because we anticipated that in the design, but they still have to come out and do the field work. So the license agreement would allow us, if you were so inclined to approve, for this is a model, to move forward with the Center for Active Living and the 100 Route 6A site. But it all is dependent on an awful lot of work that's yet to be done. But this allows Ben to be our contact with Eversource, and he really has the technical capacity that we don't have. Been working with a great team, with our facilities director, with Leanne Drake, and with the Cape Light Compact on this. So I feel pretty good that we've got the right people on board, and we should this gets us in the game to possibly install those. Sorry for the long-winded explanation, but it's never straightforward. So if you're inclined, we'd ask for your approval to move forward with a license agreement, subject to town council's review. It is in town council's hands. I haven't got comments back for him, but have reviewed the process with town council.
I got a question.
Sure.
Do they maintain these units?
They do, yeah, and that's really most important to us.
Right, so with no cost to us?
No, but I'd say the downside, if there is one, is if we installed it ourselves, maintained it ourselves, and we were using it for our own EV vehicles, it would be at a very low rate. We're likely to pay something just below market rate under this arrangement. We're not going to get a big break on the energy for our own EVs, but we won't be managing the facilities. And our goal really was to have them available both for the municipality and for the public.
Okay, and I see the projected revenues. Can we afford to lose the parking spaces?
You know, that's really going to be a question. Many communities struggle with that. I think we feel very good about 100 Route 6A, that we have, we've been there for a couple of years now. We've never met max capacity. We feel comfortable with those. We designed the parking lot in anticipation of having EV charging spots there. So we feel okay about that one. The Center for Active Living site that we're looking at is by the sports courts. Again, that lot does get heavily used, but if there is a conversion over time to EV vehicles, then those would be spots that EV vehicles could be parked in. And that's why we've got a slower evaluation of the library, because that is a tighter location.
Okay, was that part of the design as well?
Not yet, no. The library is one that they are interested in and we're interested in, but the other two are the first priority.
Any other questions for Heather?
No. All right, let's see. Move that we make motion to recommend a license agreement as presented for electrical vehicle charging stations.
Second.
Motion by Mr. George, second by Mr. Ellis. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous, 3-0. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Town Hall Annex request for proposals, update and authorization to proceed.
So there's no emergency on this one. We wanted to make sure you knew we continued our effort on finalizing the RFP, which again, this is also in the hands of town council as we speak. We speak with them sort of routinely about what we're doing, but he's got the actual draft agreement, a draft proposal to review. The area I'd really want you to study begins on page 11, which are the comparative evaluation criteria that sets forth the rating process for the town hall annex. And so there's several categories: the proposed use of the property, which gives the highest advantage to proposals that create commercial space or multifamily housing. Advantageous would be just single-family housing. Not advantageous would have limited emphasis on the creation of commercial or residential space. So it just gives categories for ranking and leaves it open to what a proposer may propose. I won't go through all of these, but they do include commitment to public parking, an impact analysis of the potential impacts of the proposed use. The financial capacity is very important of the proposer and the project team that would be carrying out the project. And then the project price is one of the evaluation criteria. Again, as you know, in an RFP, you can choose a lower valued proposal if it is a preferred proposal. So we feel pretty good about the rating. Wanted to make sure that you knew what we were doing. In terms of timing, we're getting very close to being ready to issue. We've worked with a gentleman that's done this amazing work that's out there now that with the laser photography that's available, I'll use the completely wrong terms, they can do full floor plans and architecturals, which we've done on that building for a very reasonable price, along with a photo tour of the building, and the aerials were just done this week. We've been waiting for sunshine to do that, so there'll be a little mini website that's just about done. And as soon as we hear back from council, we feel that we're in a position to move forward, and we would do that in mid-January with proposals due in the February-March timeframe. So there's two things you could do. You could hold on to this, take a look at it, give me comments, and get back to me for your next meeting. If you're comfortable, you could give us the okay to proceed, and we would move forward with the RFP. And I'm comfortable either way.
Yes.
Well, I would recommend that we punt this down the road a little bit, given that we don't have Shane. And then because there are some other things that I haven't had the opportunity to get with you, Heather, on, but I've gone through this and kind of seen some things that, an example is, we're asking an applicant to entertain one-way egress onto River Street. But that was created by an application by the town to discharge cars out onto Main Street rather than that. So it was a planning board action that blocked the access out onto River Street. So the applicant would have to go back to the planning board to achieve that. So that's something that that's something that needs to be cleaned up within the document. It doesn't need to be there. It doesn't make it. In other words, we're asking the applicant, we're asking someone to buy something that they should create, rather than asking them to buy what already exists.
Yeah, I don't, Mr. Chairman, I don't think that's the intent of the language, but if that's how it reads, we should take a look at it.
Yeah, well, it does. It reads that way because it's saying we want to entertain a one-way egress onto River Street. But right now, there is no access onto River Street, and that's the property we're selling. And it's been like that for almost 20 years. And so that's a static condition that the neighbors living around it recognize. And now, before we even put it out there for somebody to buy it, we're telling them we want to change the way the property should be used on a daily basis. I'm, just don't think that's, if that's what we're doing, then we should say it.
Just to follow up, and I completely hear what you're saying. The intent of what we had drafted was to identify that the town was open-minded to receiving a proposal that might do that. If it reads like we're asking them to do it, that really isn't our intent, so I think it's important to clarify.
I understand. Thank you.
Because really, it exists, but it's been temporarily closed.
More or less.
Yeah, unless you consult with Webster, and what's the definition of temporary? I mean, if 20 years is temporary, we got,
Let me say it this way, then. It's not a permanent structure that closes the access.
yeah.
Okay, but
I hear loud and clear, and I understand it, and we need to clean it up.
thank you very much.
Have we come up with a price tag yet?
I think that's something the board could entertain. I think in the prior conversations, we discussed not establishing a minimum reserve value, you may have voted on that. I think you did vote on that. We'll have to go back and check the record. That in an RFP process, you really are looking for proposals that meet the values of the proposal first, and that the monetary would be one of the comparative criteria. So I'd say you don't want to do that. You would chill options.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other matters not reasonably anticipated by the chairman. I have none. Anybody else?
Nope.
New business. Town planner recommended appointment, Stephen Tucker.
Yeah, so in the board's packet is a memo from myself recommending that you authorize me to be able to appoint Stephen Tucker as the town's new town planner. I'll just touch on some of the highlights that are all in your packet, but actually grew up in Sandwich, worked part-time for the town in a couple departments many, many years ago, then worked for the Cape Cod Commission for a few years, then about 20 years ago moved to sort of get involved with federal type efforts and worked down in Washington, worked in a couple of different departments, but then also most recently as a consultant for the Coast Guard and for some other areas. And I think what jumped out at us the most was not only his intelligence and varied background that we think would be very helpful, but also like his passion for the community and wanting to give back to the town he grew up in. And if anyone recognizes the last name, it is a true local hero, Diane Tucker's son, who was a select board member many, many years ago, finance committee, school committee. And so just, we felt really good after the interviews, and the team consisted of Charlie, Heather, Marie Buckner, and Tara Way from the HR department, who oversee all of our efforts in this respect, and then Leanne Drake, the Director of Community Development, who this position would report to. So, I think at the end of our interview process and the follow-up and the references were just glowing. We're very excited, and we think there's a huge potential here, even though it'd be fair to say does not really have town planner background experience, but has experience in many of the areas that we deal with, and clearly would be a fast study on anything that he would encounter.
I agree. He made me comfortable.
All right. You got anything, Pat?
Go ahead.
I recommend that we make a motion to appoint Steve Tucker as town planner.
Second.
Motion by Mr. George, second by Mr. Ellis. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous. 3-0.
And we think, just in discussions with him, because he's in the process of relocating back up here, that would probably start in the late January, early February timeframe. So.
Recommended Historic District Committee appointments. Anybody have any?
Yeah, the information's in your packet, so there's,
Yeah, I got that.
Okay, so we'll handle them separately.
Okay.
And,
All right, we'll do him first. Pete Williams. You do that one first. Make a motion, we appoint Pete Williams, Fleetwood Road, East Sandwich, Sandwich Historical District, 2025 calendar year.
Second.
motion by Mr. George, second by Mr. Ellis. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, 3-0, it's unanimous.
Okay, make a motion, appoint Michael Sullivan, 27 Nod Ave, Sandwich, Mass, to the Sandwich Historical District as an alternative 2025 year.
Second.
Motion by Mr. George, second by Mr. Ellis. All those in favor?
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Okay.
Motion fails 2-1. Other matters not reasonably anticipated by the chairman. I have none. Second opportunity for public comment.
Nobody? Okay.
Closing remarks. May our Sandwich community enjoy a happy and safe holiday season. It's interesting that once every 20 years or so, Christmas and Hanukkah fall on the same day. This might be a particularly opportune time to maintain those under attack in Eastern Europe, the conflict in the Middle East, and the overall threats to world peace in our thoughts and prayers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Merry Christmas, everyone,
Merry Christmas.
or happy holidays.
Mm.
Sorry.
And happy birthday, Charlie.
You are? I am too.
Is that right?
Christmas.
I'm the 27th.
Wow, wow.
Well,
Okay, that
Wow,
That's impressive.
this is
Shortchanged on gifts for your whole lives.
the birthday season. Okay,
make a motion, we adjourn.
One at that time deserves extra birthday celebration.
motion to adjourn by Mr. George, second by Mr. Ellis. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it's 3-0. We'll be meeting on Thursday, January 9th, 2025, here in Historic Town Hall at 7 p.m. And again, happy holidays to everyone in our community.